Hey, Stoney here with another game of Mechabellum, and in this game I'm up against a 2000 plus MMR player. He'll be going a supply specialist and I am marksman specialist. I started with tanks and crawlers and of course the level 3 marksman. Now when you're against crawlers and steel balls, most of the time you're expecting to go aggro on one of these sides, and the reason being both steel balls and crawlers aren't particularly good because they don't have any range, so they rely on their speed to get up in your face and deal the damage. And doing aggro allows them to have a shorter travel distance to the towers so that they can get a debuff hopefully sooner, and once they do, they'll mop up the other side of the board. I ended up choosing my units or placing my units in sort of an even spread because I believe, well, first of all, it's a little risky to guess which side my opponent's going to be. And secondly, my units, especially my sledgehammers, are fairly slow compared to his units. And if I chose the wrong side, he will take tower, and by then my crawlers will be too far out away from the sledgehammers to protect them. So because of that, I've decided to have an even spread and just added additional sets of crawlers and see what he does. My opponents chose to add arc lights. It's a very logical choice. Without arc lights, neither the steel balls nor the crawlers are particularly good at clearing chaff. I added additional sets of crawlers, hoping to overwhelm my opponents, knowing that he will most likely go arc light, but two arc lights is still going to take a while to kill 4 groups, well, in this case 5 groups of crawlers. And hopefully by the time the arc lights are done, my tanks would have done more damage to the steel balls. Alright, round 2. So first of all, let's look at the board. Let's identify if there's any kinks in our armor, if there's any ways we can improve our board. So my opponent is supply specialist, which means he does have the additional 50 supply per turn. Because he only went with 2 arc lights for the first turn, that means he saved that initial 50, which means by now he should have an additional 100 supply. So at round 2, while I'm getting only 400 supply, my opponent will have 500 supply, giving him quite a bit of flexibility to summon whatever he needs. So let's take a look at your unit cards. Fire Badger is an excellent choice for my opponent. I already have 5 squads of crawlers. They're running towards him. And it's not a bad decision for me as well, because he has 3 sets of crawler as well. Sabertooth might be a good decision, simply to give a bit more firepower on my opponent's side. Wasp is a bit of a cheeky move. Neither of us have any anti-air. I do have an orange man, so I am slightly more covered than my opponent. And Mustang at this round, I think, is maybe better for me than it is for my opponent, but I already have sledgehammers and my chaff clear is decent at this point. And I may not, yeah, it's better for me than it is for my opponent, I think. But Wasp might be an interesting choice, and Sabertooth might be an interesting choice. So for my opponent, I think what he really wants to get through is the thick armor of my tanks. He chose the Sabertooth, which I think makes sense. While the rest of his units are engaging with the crawlers, the Sabertooth should be able to get a few shots into the tanks. I chose the Wasps and I put them on the flank, hoping to take tower. And I added Mechanical Rage on his tanks for additional chaff clear. I set it up this way with the intention of doing more tanks in the future. The reason I didn't add more tanks this turn is because I want to ensure that these 2 tanks get a level up from this turn. And with the Wasp here flanking the tower, I think I have a fairly good chance of getting a level up. So once you get tower disabled, these tanks will be able to do the damage and get the experience required. Once these tanks are leveled up, adding 2 more sets of tanks, leveling these 2, then you have a very solid front line with mech rage tanks. My opponent added an additional arc light and a set of stormcallers. I'm not too sure about the stormcallers. I guess it's really a solid answer for my tanks. But as far as chaff clear, I'm not too sure because most of my units will actually be fighting up front. Sure, he did some damage to the middle crawler, but I'm not too sure if the stormcallers is the greatest idea because I don't have any slow units just yet. Alright, my wasp did what they're supposed to do. Got rid of the tower, and of course my tanks are here. This one is already leveled, this one is almost leveled, and hopefully by the time it gets the rest of the unit, they should be leveled. Just barely, which is a shame. Okay, so round 3. My opponent currently does not have any anti-air, so I will expect him to put down a set of Mustangs, maybe on the side. I chose the Wasp Swarm, and it's just a matter of which way I should put it down. He already knows that I have these level 2 Wasp here in this corner, so I expect him to put Mustangs down this way. And that means I can either put the Wasp Swarm on the other side or have it in the middle, hoping that he will use Mustangs at the corner to cover his flank. I selected Jump Drive. It's a very cheap technology for 50 resources. And I moved my Mustang towards the middle to provide additional firepower as my tanks go in. And here's my opponent choosing the Mustangs. So we put a set of Mustangs on the side and a set of Mustangs in the middle. And move the Mustangs to the side, of course. So it is expected. So it is outside of this tower. And I'm hoping if I put my Wasp here, I may be able to take it down. I also wanted to add some crawlers just to delay the Mustangs a little bit longer. And I've added the Wasp on the side. And this was a mistake because I was already expecting Mustangs coming in on the side. I think the play was really just, I was hoping the crawlers would come in and as the Mustangs were kind of being pinned down, but it was not the right move. I put down a missile right there in the middle, expecting a set of fangs to serve as advanced chaff. I did so because I wanted my Wasp to fly in right there in the middle, knowing that the Mustangs are most likely going to be on the side. Unfortunately, he didn't put any fangs, so my missile actually caught a arc light and almost didn't. Alright, he's actually doing quite well this turn. And also last turn, instead of going 2 extra set of tanks, I chose a Stormcaller, anticipating additional chaff and also Mustangs. In hindsight, I should have probably went with the additional set of tanks. That would have cleared the board a little bit more efficiently. Okay, so round 4. A lot of interesting cards. I think Missile Strike is interesting. This Mustang is already getting a level after killing my Wasp and also these crawlers. So having a missile right somewhere here will be very interesting. Intensive training is interesting as well. I am going with carry sledgehammers. So the higher the level for these sledgehammers, the more powerful they'll be. Smoke Bomb, not bad either. Iron Blast is a little premature. None of us really have a strong line just yet, so you can choose Iron Blast, but chances are you're just going to cash a few units and nothing, and for the cost is not justified for this turn. So I end up picking Missile Strike. And I put the missile right here, expecting these Mustangs to move over. Okay. And I believe my opponent skipped, or I'm not sure. He might have picked Shoot Device Specialist last turn. Alright. After seeing this many Mustangs, I wanted to make sure that I have enough units to protect my flanks, and as well as getting the chaff clear I need. So I added another set of Stonecrawlers and of course 2 more Sledgehammers on the far flank, just aiming at the arc lights and of course the Mustangs. My opponent was anticipating my missile strike, so he put the shield bubble here. Now, as the battle continues, you'll notice that the crawler on the flank is not doing too much. So that's something that I want to sell later on. A lot of times, I see players leave crawlers on the flank even though they're not doing anything. Justification as well. They pull the army over. Right? In some cases, that may be true. So, for example, if they are defending with arc lights or something that's a little slower, then they will start walking down this way. If that makes sense. In this case, because the Mustangs are right there on the edge with the crawlers, we're not really pulling them away for that long. So it doesn't justify the additional cost here. And furthermore, every time they kill the set of crawlers, they're going to get experience and free experience, which will allow those Mustangs to level up. And I do not want to give them an opportunity. Alright, round 5. So let's take a look at my board. I think my board is pretty healthy. I wouldn't be surprised if I take range on this turn. Tank with range at this point is very difficult to deal with. Let's take a look at the units. Level 3 Scorpion is a good unit. It's a good unit for both of us actually. For him, the Scorpion will be a direct counter to my tanks. So it really just comes down to the chaff wars. Whoever gets the most chaff will essentially get the first shot from the Scorpion onto the enemy's carry unit. So we both pick Scorpions. I've added range on Scorpions on turn 1, wanting to really win that Scorpion fight. My crawlers hopefully will protect me for a little bit. But just to be extra safe, I added sets of fans just in front of my tanks in case he does go Scorpions himself. My opponent was thinking the same thing, added extra sets of fans. So now we're almost even on a set of crawlers. I think I still have just a few more crawlers more than him. However, he has the Mustangs, which does contribute to the chaff. Alright. So for my opponent, I guess the way he wants his line to be is arc lights, Scorpions, with the support of Mustangs. For me, I think the way I want my board to play is Sledgehammers, Scorpion with support of Stonecrawlers. His units are a little bit more fragile than mine, but they are shooting from behind these larger units. So they're providing tanking to these units, while my Sledgehammers are just running a little too far away. I noticed this problem when I was playing in game, and I wanted to fix it by simply getting range with 2 of these Sledgehammers. I lost the Scorpion War here because of the Mustangs were doing additional damage. this round goes to my opponent. Alright, round 6. Extended range fortress is interesting. However, I already started with scorpions, I already tapped the scorpions, so I want to make sure that I get the most out of the scorpions. If I didn't have the scorpions, I might have taken the extended range fortress and used fortress as my main tank, where my sledgehammers will be the damage dealers. I'll continue to add on more sets of Stormcallers. He only have 2 Sabertooth with anti-missile device, so I was expecting my Stormcallers to contribute even more to the chaff here. Took range on the sledgehammers and added even more chaff. For my opponent, he added extra chaff on both sides. He took range on his scorpions. And even more chaff in the center. So if all works well, my Stormcaller should do a decent job of clearing out all this chaff here. With the high explosive armor, all the units that's on this side will simply get crushed if the missiles were to land. So the missiles are firing, some of them are landing, and I don't need a lot of missiles to land. All I need is just a few, because with the high explosive missiles, they do splash damage. Alright, this turn is looking slightly better than the last. However, I did get an unfortunate tower debuff, which allows him to take the rest of my army. Alright. So I am still struggling with a bit of a chaff clear. I think, sure, I've had lots of Stormcallers, but the missiles are being intercepted just a little bit. I think the sledgehammers are doing okay, but once the chaffs are cleared, they're not going to be doing too much damage after that, because they're just simply getting sniped by this one. And to fix that problem, I added shields on my fans, so they're now doubly effective as chaff, and I added 3 more sets of fans just arriving at a later stage of the battle. Now with this, I'm hoping the scorpions will have a tougher time locking onto my tanks, and that'll give us, hopefully, more opportunity to get his units. He added in a war factory, and a war factory is a very strong unit. And now it's a war factory with missile interceptor. So what that means is that a major source of my chaff gear, these Stormcallers, will become completely useless. So with this war factory, these 2 sets of Stormcallers will be useless. This one will probably be mostly useless, since after it clears out the middle chaff, is going to split. So it's an excellent move from my opponent, is effectively tying up. So this is what, 200, 200, 300, 300, about 1,000 resource on my side of the board, and converting them or nullifying them so that they're not doing anything. So that's an excellent move. And it's also causing a problem, because right now the only units that can deal with the war factory is really this level 3 Scorpion. These tanks, while they're pretty tanky against these smaller units, but against the war factory that does 7,500 per shot, it will 2-shot these tanks. And because they have splash, right, 5-meter splash, it will kill these tanks very quickly. Didn't take is official maintenance, he'll be losing an additional 100 resources simply by having a war factory on board. And he also took a loan, which means his next turn is going to be very weak. Right? So his next turn he will be down from the very beginning 400 resources because he borrowed this turn and he's also doing the maintenance. No, actually more than 400, probably down to 500 resources. So what that means is even though I may lose this turn, but for the next turn, I'll have a pretty good chance at winning. But even for this turn, I am not doing too bad because my level 3 sledgehammers are now fighting back, and my level 3 scorpion is still alive. Sure, he got a debuff, but I will also get a debuff in just a second, and my level 3 scorpion is going to kill his level 1 scorpion, and of course, hopefully taking down the rest of his army. Okay, so I got a bit lucky on that last game. So now we need to figure out what is my response to this war factory. So right now, a huge source of my opponent's strength comes from the technologies. There's range technology on the Scorpion, there's range technology on the Arclight, there's anti-missile on Sabertooth, there's anti-missile on Factory. I want to take away this technology and he will be very vulnerable to my attack. For example, if I can take away the Scorpion's range technology, that means the Scorpion will have to walk an additional 40 meters. At 7 meters per second, that's almost 6 additional seconds that the Scorpion is doing nothing but walking towards my unit. And also, with the electromagnetic shot, it decreases the movement speed by 40%. So if my tank hits a Scorpion, the Scorpion is going to walk for about 10 seconds before it can even engage one of my sledgehammers. Okay? Right now, my sledgehammers is about even in terms of range, so 150 versus 155. But if my sledgehammers can disable the Scorpion, this Scorpion is going to take forever to get to my tank. And that is a significant advantage at this stage of the game, especially if I have high-level sledgehammers. It's the same story with the War Factory. Once I get rid of the War Factory technology, my Storm Powers should be able to get to or land their missiles fairly easily and kill each other. Now the question is, can I get a shot on the War Factory before all the chaff comes down to my head? Right? So the strategy is working well. Look at this side. This level 3 Scorpion, right, is now being disabled with electromag. It's also walking under the smoke. And it took them quite some time to get in range, and right now it's still shooting in my chaff. My right side is going to win, however my left side has fallen. I think largely it's due to this level 3 Scorpion and of course a few of the higher level sledgehammers. Luckily I am going to take the tower, which means the debuff might win me the game. So this Scorpion is here, dealing a ton of damage. The sledgehammers contributing to that damage as well. Perfect. Alright. So the round was not bad. I think we were able to solve several of the problems. However, we do need a definitive answer to these war factories, because what he can do is just continue to pump out these war factories and eventually overpower me. I'm very surprised that he still hasn't taken efficient maintenance, because 2 war factories, I believe that's a total of 400 resources spent just per turn to maintain these units. And that's quite a lot of expense to have these larger units. So my answer to these war factories is just range melting points. I didn't need a lot of them, I just need to have at least one per war factory. And I'm fully expecting him to go for another war factory. But my opponent has something different in mind. In the free unit drop, he did choose the Wraith. The Wraith with armor is a beast of a unit. Right now, the only thing that shoots up on my side of the board are these fangs. And a level 4 Wraith with armor will negate 4 times 60, 240 damage per shot. And my fangs are only dealing 62 damage. So without any other units, these Wraiths would simply just walk in, kill everything, and win him the round. Unfortunately for him, I was using Melting Point as an answer to the War Factories, and indirectly I've also answered the Wraith problem. So this is an example of unit efficiency. At later stage of the game, units like Melting Points are generally better tools because of its ability as well as to focusing down single target units. So for things like Wraith or Overlord, as well as these larger giant units. So this one lock onto the Wraith. The middle is still having a bit of problem with chaff here. So right now what's happening is that these Mustangs are running ahead of the War Factory, and it's causing my Melting Point to lock onto the Mustangs instead of the War Factory. Now fortunately, my middle Melting Point is locking onto the War Factory and eventually bringing it down. The oil is causing a bit of problem because I'm unable to get to his tower and he did get to my tower, which means he has the opportunity to simply power down my Melting Point. But overall, it's not a terrible round. I think we are in a very good spot. Lightning Storm was offered. I think Lightning Storm is a good card to take. Both of us have a ton of chaff, so whatever we can use to even bring that down just a little bit would be a good option. Senior Defense Specialist is also a good card to take because we're very late into the game, so there's already a lot of health on board. And it would just be a tremendous boost if you can get a 30% health increase for every single unit on the board. And especially for a cheap price of $350. I expected the Lightning Storm, so I added shield bubbles across the board. I've also added crawler production. I noticed that in later stages, once my chaff runs out, the tanks were dealing with just a little bit too much damage to my sledgehammers, so the crawler production may help with some of that. Alright, so my opponent's side, he took fire on the Stormcallers. I was not expecting fire. I did not have any anti-missiles prepared for that. So I expect to take quite a bit of loss on my chaff this turn. The shield bubbles will help, but the fire was simply just and that's exactly what happened. You notice all my crawlers are kind of running in. The fire also ignited the pool of oil here, so this is a pretty big round for my opponent. Luckily, I was able to bring down one of his war factories, so I'm not taking too much damage to my health. Alright, so it's an excellent round for my opponent. Round 11. Okay. Laser sight is a pretty good item on a melting point. Advanced firepower control system is a pretty good item on one of his Mustangs. Probably this one back here is already level 5. So if you pick the advanced fire control, it's going to triple the damage. So these are going to be insanely powerful Mustangs. Yeah, took the advanced fire control, puts on the Mustangs. So let's take a look at the board. I think my board here is slightly stronger than my opponent's. I think I have the answer to pretty much all his problems. The large units, so these 2 units, I have enough melting point to answer for that. The Wraith, I also have melting point answer for that. In the free unit drop, I chose the Fire Badgers. They're being used as currently just a pure tanking unit. As far as the rest of the chaff is concerned, I think my Stormcrawlers are still contributing, even though they're being slowed down a little bit by the anti-missiles. Therefore, the Fire Badgers are there to add the additional support. I think what I lack is an answer to the opposing forces Stormcrawlers, which means I probably will need anti-missile devices. 1 per each Stormcrawler that he has. So 4. I probably could use even more chaff, because my units deal pretty good damage. But instead of chaff, I added more melting point because these are already double tacked, and more importantly, they have crawler production, so they each bring their own set of chaff into this army. So instead of just getting chaff, because at later games when you have a lot of money, what's really limiting you is just your deployment. You can only deploy up to 3 sets of units per turn, so you want to get the most out of each unit. And if I just get 3 sets of fans, I have all this money left over that I don't know what to do with. It'd be a little bit more efficient simply by getting a few more melting points. Alright, put down anti-missile devices, which means the fire is no longer a concern. My fans are now moving forward, tanking the damage it was designed to do. My melting points are now actively contributing in the battle, even in chaff there. And looking at the chaff on the board, it seems like his chaff is running thin. My last group of fans is just walking past my battle line, but that's okay because my tanks, now that their job of chaff clearing is done, will then serve as chaff themselves, allowing my melting points to target into these larger units. Alright, this one is already locked onto the war factory. These 3 are locked onto this war factory as well. And with that, this is GG. Alright, let's take a look at the board. Let's see what are some of the things we missed. For my opponent's side, I think not taking efficient maintenance while having 2 war factories on the board for about 3 or 4 turns is definitely a mistake. I would just take this. Yes, there's going to be a 200 premium for the next technology, but I think you still end up saving money that way. I think the fire was a good touch. I'm surprised that I didn't sell more of my Stormcrawlers because they really weren't contributing in the later rounds, especially after these war factories upgraded. I should have been selling the Stormcrawlers and adding even more Sledgehammers or even Mustangs just for Chaffger. I think Sledgehammers might be a better option just to add a few more here in between and just help with the Chaffger. I think the final decision of adding more melting point was justified because they brought their own chaff and also they helped with just bringing down these larger units. Well, I hope you enjoyed this game and I hope to see you on the next one.